Well, the long-awaited settlement in the House versus NCAA lawsuit that's been going on for a couple of years has finally reached its conclusion. It's finally reached a resolution. The judge officially signed off on it a few days ago, paving the way for colleges and universities to begin direct payments to student athletes. Good morning, it's Uncle Lou. That's right, it is me, Uncle Lou, live on LouTube for you. Thanks for watching. Really appreciate it. Also, in addition to that as well, make sure you subscribe to this channel if you're not already. I post these pointless, barely watchable college football videos almost every single day of the year. We do call-in shows multiple times a week, live streams on the weekends. We have a really good time. It's a great college football community. Make sure you hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel and join the fun. All right, I'm going to skip over a lot of what is involved in this lawsuit here that's not directly related to college football. I'm going to come at this from a purely college football point of view and standpoint. There's a lot of intricacies and details and kind of legalese embedded into this settlement that doesn't directly deal with college football. For example, possible Title IX implications, what's going to happen to some of the non-revenue sports or the Olympic sports at some of these schools. There's some talk that some of that may go away. I'm not going to get into all that. This is a college football channel, so we're going to look at what has happened here from purely a college football point of view. If you want sort of all the details involved in this settlement, you can literally Google House versus NCAA settlement. There are hundreds and hundreds of articles that have been written over the last couple of days that explain the details of the settlement much better than I could do here in a 10 or a 15-minute YouTube video. So for college football, what we're looking at here is the schools and the universities now having the ability to directly pay the players. It'll be a capped amount. It's going to start at about $20.5 million per year for this upcoming season. The direct payments are set to start on July 1st. $20.5 million is the cap. That's not purely the cap on football. That's the cap school-wide. So schools will have to take that $20.5 million and divide it however they want amongst all of their student athletes at their individual schools. There's a lot of talk going around. Obviously, college football teams are going to get the lion's share of that $20.5 million as they are what brings in the majority of the money. So you've seen numbers floating around anywhere from 75 to 80 to 85% of that $20.5 million that each individual school is going to be given out is going to be going to the football players. How that money is distributed amongst the football players is up to the school. You can pay the starting quarterback more than you pay the third string. That kind of thing, right? So every school is going to approach this situation sort of a little bit differently in terms of the exact amounts they pay each individual player. But similar to a salary cap in the NFL, each school is capped at $20.5 million that they can pay out total per year to the student athletes. And again, that's across all sports. That amount is scheduled to go up on a sliding scale each year over the next 10 years. But for this season, it's going to start at $20.5 million. College football rosters are going to now be limited to 105 spots per team. Now, we all are sort of familiar with the 85 scholarship limit that has been around forever. And then, the teams bring in walk-ons or whatever else. And you end up with college football rosters that in some cases have 120, 125, 130 players on them. The coaches like this for practice reasons and sort of scout team reasons and things like that. That number is going to have a hard cap of 105. Now, that cap is not immediate. You're going to be grandfathered in if you have players on your team, say that are there now, they don't have to be removed. But sort of starting 3 years down the road, I guess, and going forward, that hard cap of 105 will be in place. So the teams are going to have to take that $20.5 million and distribute it amongst those 105 players. And again, how they distribute that money will be up to each individual school. Now, the idea behind this, at least the hope behind this, is that this direct payment of money from the universities to the players is going to somehow minimize or potentially even do away with some of the NIL stuff that has been going on over the last 4 or 5 years. And I'm going to be honest with you. I like what I see when I read about the House settlement, what it's doing, what it intends to do, what it is trying to eliminate. It all sounds great. And maybe I'm a little bit jaded, and I probably am, having watched what has happened to college football over the last 4 or 5 years. I'm cautiously optimistic that this House settlement is going to be able to potentially solve some of the sort of issues on the periphery that have annoyed us as college football fans over the last 4 or 5 years, never-ending transfers, the ability for NIL collectives to basically buy players directly out of high school, call it an NIL deal, when in reality, we all kind of know it's not really an NIL deal. You're just paying the player to come play for your particular school, right? So how does this House settlement deal with that? How does it look to sort of curtail what has been going on with the boosters and the NIL collectives? Well, as part of this settlement, they have established a third-party regulatory agency. It's an independent company, separate and apart from the NCAA. In fact, it has nothing to do with the NCAA. And the best way to sort of think about this outside agency is as sort of like an NIL deal clearinghouse. And what I mean by that is what's going to happen going forward is, any NIL deal that a player signs is going to have to be entered into a computer system that is ran and operated by this third-party system. Every single school in the country is going to have access to this computer system. And any NIL deal that a player enters into, the school is going to be responsible for entering the details of that NIL deal into this computer software program monitored by the third-party company. The third-party company is then going to review those NIL deals, and if for any reason that NIL deal doesn't meet a certain list of criteria, that they're calling it quote unquote a valid business purpose, it's going to have to be it's going to have to meet market standards. It's going to have to fall within reasonable expectations for what an NIL deal would be. And if that third party sort of monitoring agency does not sign off on the NIL deal, the player cannot receive the money. So it's basically it's almost like an overview, an oversight committee, and they're going to review every NIL deal. And if it's not a legitimate NIL deal, they're going to have the ability to stop it and prevent it from happening, in theory. And we'll get to the in theory part in a second, because I'm just, again, because of what's going on in college football over the last 4 or 5 years, that sounds great. Let's get sort of the buying players thing out of college football. Let's get rid of the collectives. Let's turn NIL back into what NIL was supposed to be. Your starting quarterback gets an endorsement deal from Kentucky Fried Chicken and appears in a Kentucky Fried Chicken commercial. That's a legitimate NIL endorsement. That's an endorsement deal. That's a legitimate NIL deal. And this clearinghouse would approve that. No problem. And whether KFC is paying that player $1 million, $5 million, whatever it is, to appear in a series of commercials or whatever it is, the clearinghouse would approve that. What is no longer going to be approved by this clearinghouse, this sort of monitoring agency that has been set up on the outside, is this idea that a collective has $12 million sitting around and they decide they need a quarterback. So they promise a high school quarterback $1 million a year to enroll in their school. That will not get approved in theory under this new sort of monitoring agency that's been set up on the outside as sort of an oversight committee into college football. Now that sounds great. NIL, as far as its intended purpose goes, I don't know anybody that has a legitimate issue with NIL as far as its intended purpose, right? If a player wants to hold an autograph session down at Academy Sports and sit there for 4 hours on a Tuesday signing autographs for $100 a piece, he should be allowed to do that. And it might sound like common sense, but you have to remember 5 years ago, that was against NCAA rules. A player couldn't do that. That's what NIL is supposed to be. The player can sell his autograph. He can appear in commercials for national companies or local companies. You play for the University of Alabama, for example, and a car dealership in Tuscaloosa wants to put the starting linebacker in a car commercial or wants to put the offensive lineman in a car commercial. That car dealership, under the NIL rules, can pay that offensive lineman or the running back or whoever else from Alabama to appear in a car commercial, endorsing their dealership. I don't know anybody that has any problems or issues with that. The problems have come when boosters, collectives, agents have gotten involved over the last 4 or 5 years and figured out a way to sort of circumvent not really the rules of NIL, because that's the problem. There aren't any rules, but to sort of circumvent the intended purpose of NIL and turn NIL into, well, let's just go buy the players that the coaches want, whether it's out of high school, through the transfer portal, whatever the case may be. That's what NIL has turned into. Money funneled through these boosters that call themselves NIL collectives that basically just hand over cash to the players to come play for the team with no real outside obligation to use their name, image, and likeness to promote or endorse anything. It's strictly just a pay-for-play scheme, basically. And again, because the NCAA has had its legs sort of taken out from underneath it due to all these lawsuits that have been filed over the last 5 or 6 years, we found ourselves in a situation where there was nobody with any authority in college football that was able to do anything about the runaway train that was pay-for-play disguised as NIL. So as part of this House settlement, they are giving that authority to this outside agency that will review every single NIL deal that's done by every single player at every single school in the Power Four and the Group of Five. And it's going to have to meet that certain set of criteria. If it doesn't meet that set of criteria, then this monitoring agency is going to deny the NIL deal, and the school will not be allowed, or the collective or the business or whatever it is will not be allowed to funnel that money to that kid. Again, that's the theory here that's put forward in this suit. I'm just kind of waiting on the first lawsuit, though. Because here's the issue, okay? If I want to pay a kid $1 million for his autograph, is that an NIL deal? If I'm a rich booster and I know that my team needs a quarterback bad, and there's one that the team wants, and I'm willing to pay that kid $1 million or $5 million for his autograph, is that an NIL deal? Now, it's been called an NIL deal the last 3 or 4 years, right? According to this clearinghouse that's been set up, they would look at that deal and they would go, no, that doesn't fit the sort of marketplace criteria. That's not a valid business purpose. The amount doesn't match the service. They're going to deny that. Well, what happens if the kid, the player, whether it's a high school recruit, a transfer portal player, whoever it is, decides, well, wait a minute. What business is it of some outside company to tell me what my autograph is worth? And they sue. It could happen. It might sound far-fetched, but just look at all the lawsuits that have come up over the last 4 or 5 years. It's absolutely mind-boggling. Now, the conferences, to their credit, are having seen what we all saw happen over the last 4 or 5 years, which was NIL just got dumped in everyone's lap, and they said, go figure it out, go deal with it. The schools were not prepared. They didn't know how to handle it. They didn't know what they could do, what they couldn't do. So in an effort to try to sort of learn from past mistakes there, these conferences have sort of looked ahead to this House settlement, what it's intended to do, what it means, what it's intended to do, and the potential ways that people might try to get around it. And so one of the things that the conferences are doing now, the SEC, the Big Ten have both made statements about this. I'm not sure on the ACC and the Big 12, although I'm sure they will. They're going to draw up paperwork. Each conference is going to draw up paperwork, submit it to the schools, and each school's athletic department is going to be required to sign this paperwork. And basically what the paperwork says is, as an athletic department, we agree to abide by all of the rules within the House settlement. Now, this is a legal document, so I'm sure it's much longer than that. It's a contract, right? It's probably 100 pages long for no reason. You know how these things are. But that's the gist of it. We're gonna draw up this contract that says every school within our conference. So let's just take the SEC. Greg Sankey is going to send this paperwork to all of the schools within the SEC, and they're going to be required to sign it, basically agreeing to follow the rules and regulations set forth in the House versus NCAA settlement. If they don't sign it, or if they don't want to follow those rules, according to Greg Sankey, and Petiti from the Big Ten has said the same thing, those schools will be removed from the conference. Now, again, will that actually happen? Will we ever get to that point to find out? Will a school push the limit on that? We don't know. Will an agent or a player push the limit on how much an autograph is worth if it gets denied by the clearinghouse? We don't know. But they're at least making an effort to see down the road and try to maybe head some of this stuff off before we get to the sort of train wreck moment of that kind of thing happening. Now, a lot of this was kind of facilitated. You may remember hearing about this a couple of months ago. The state legislature in Tennessee actually passed a state law in Tennessee that none of its schools within their state, Tennessee, had to abide by any House versus NCAA settlement, that they were going to have their own list of rules and regulations for within the state of Tennessee, and they were going to supersede any rules or regulations established by the House versus NCAA settlement. Basically, what they were doing or trying to do, the state of Tennessee, was to get out in front of whatever potential rules come into place through the House versus NCAA settlement. Now, this is nothing new for the state of Tennessee, going back to the NICO lawsuit, right? The reason right now that the NCAA doesn't have the ability to police NIL deals is because the state of Tennessee, on behalf of the University of Tennessee and on behalf of NICO, sued the NCAA when the NCAA was investigating Tennessee's NIL recruitment of Nico. And the state of Tennessee won their lawsuit against the NCAA, which basically made it against the law illegal federally for the NCAA to enforce any NIL rules or regulations. That got us to where we're at now. The House settlement now comes out that lays a roadmap out for how to deal with NIL. And even before it came out, the state of Tennessee is going, well, we're going to get ahead of this again before it happens. And they passed a law within the state of Tennessee saying we're not obligated to follow anything in the House versus NCAA settlement. We're within our own state, we're going to have our own rules. Well, Greg Sankey, the commissioner of the SEC, has since come out and said, not if they're going to be in the SEC. They're not. And this is, of course, an effort to try to create some sort of parity, both within each conference and then across college football as a whole. And again, I think that's something that as college football fans, we would sort of all generally be in favor of. Maybe we don't agree on every single rule, every single regulation, every single change, every single limit or whatever that's placed on things. I mean, there are millions and millions of us as college football fans. We're never going to agree on every single rule or policy. But I think we do need to agree that there needs to be a set of rules and policies, and that whether individually we agree with every one of those rules and policies, every single team underneath that umbrella needs to be operating under the same set of rules and policies. And that's what the NCAA versus House or House versus NCAA settlement is attempting to do, at least when it comes to NIL. Now, this doesn't do anything to really address the sort of never-ending transfer problem that's out there. I've got my own opinions on that, and I've expressed them before. I feel like until the players become actual employees of the university, unionize, and are given the right to collectively bargain, I don't think there's anything that can be done anywhere on any level to sort of curtail the transfer issue that a lot of college football fans have problems with. It's been ruled on in multiple cases in multiple states, but state courts and federal courts, that the NCAA, schools, conferences, whatever, have no legal authority to restrict the transfer of a college student. In other words, they can't tell a college student at the University of Georgia that he has to stay at the University of Georgia and he cannot transfer to Michigan. It's just been ruled on over and over and over again. The only way, in my opinion, we'll ever overcome that sort of issue is if the players become actual employees, unionize, and are allowed to collectively bargain. And then you're looking at a situation similar to the NFL where when a player chooses a school, he will sign a contract to stay with that school for a certain number of years. Maybe it's 2 years, maybe it's his entire 4 years, whatever it is. And the only way out of that contract would be through some sort of, monetary, I don't want to say penalty, but maybe a monetary repayment of maybe what he's received from the school up to that point. But until that happens, I don't think anything's going to be done with the transfer thing. But this is at least an effort, a long time in the making here with the House versus NCAA settlement to kind of try to reel in some of the sort of wild, wild west NIL style or pretending to be NIL style buying of players that's sort of gone on in college football over the last 4 or 5 years since NIL became legal. Again, there's a lot more detail and intricacy involved in this case. You can find it anywhere. You just Google House versus NCAA settlement. And like I said, there's hundreds of articles written over the last couple of days that'll explain all this stuff way better than I do. I mainly just wanted to come on and give kind of my opinion on sort of what it means, what the intent of it is going forward, and what I think will actually happen. And the truth is, I'm just not sure. I'm fairly confident that some of this at some point will get challenged legally by someone. What will the result of that legal challenge be? I don't know. Maybe that's sort of the next domino to fall on kind of the path towards unionization and collective bargaining, which, like I said, I think is the only thing in the end that is going to solve or eliminate the majority of problems that we as college football fans have with today's version of college football. But anyway, there it is, the House versus NCAA settlement, my opinions and thoughts on it. Let me know what you think down below, and have a good morning.